Taking a long plane ride soon, but dreading the long trip? I got you. The plane used to be my office, like literally. That's where I used to spend 90% of my work hours in. So in today's video, I can share with you the tips and tricks to make your next flight more comfortable. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Fabi, and on this channel, I share my nonlinear life journey to encourage you to embrace your own journey and feel less alone in the process. So if you don't already know, I used to fly as a flight attendant with Singapore Airlines for 4 years. I've actually made a couple videos about my flying journey, so if you're interested in checking those out, I will link them in the description box down below and you can check them out after you watch this video. So while flying, I've operated flights of all lengths. That includes the longest flight in the world, which is the Singapore to New York flight that takes 17 hours. I've seen with my own eyes and heard so many stories about how passengers would usually struggle to make themselves feel comfortable. So as the holiday season is just around the corner and you might be getting ready to travel soon, which is exciting, let me share my 6 proven tips to make your long flight more comfortable and enjoyable. And I will say that these tips will be most applicable to you who are flying economy class. Because let's be real, like business class and even first class are designed to make travelers feel more comfortable, hence the hefty price. Okay, so my first tip is to choose an aisle seat. I personally think that aisle seat is the best, especially for a long flight. Why I say that is because I think that there's more space to maneuver and move around. And I know that for some people who want to romanticize their travels, like shooting an Instagram Reels, TikTok, an Instagram story of the outside view, window seat is the best for that. But I think when it comes to a long flight, it's best to choose comfort over that stuff. Like that's just my personal opinion. So I think that choosing an aisle seat would help you make your long flight more enjoyable and comfortable at the first place. Now, in my opinion, aisle seats also have their own tiers. I break it out into tier A and tier B. So let's say you're flying on a plane with a 333 seat configuration. The D seat and the G seat in the middle section, that is God tier. Okay, that's like the best aisle seat. The reason why is because imagine if it's a full flight and there is someone seated in the middle, and during that long flight, if you're seated on either the D seat or the G seat, that means that that person can actually alternate who to bother every time they want to get in or out of their seat. And then the tier under the God tier is the premium tier. Why I say premium is because it's still an aisle seat, and that would be the C seat and the G seat. And why this is still preferable, because it's still an aisle seat but less preferable as compared to the first two, is because in this scenario you have 2 people who are seated on the window seat and on the middle seat. So every time they need to get out, you have to get out for the most part. It's still a good seat if you choose an aisle seat, but it's just less preferable as compared to the God tier. Aisle seats are generally pretty high in demand, especially if you travel with an airline who lets you choose your seats for free. So I would highly recommend you book your seats as soon as you're able to check in. My second tip is to avoid the first and last few rows of the cabin. Okay, let me start with why I recommend you avoid the last few rows of the cabin. It is simply because the washrooms are located there. It is legit distracting, not only the smell, but also the traffic and also the light coming out of the washroom. When people open and close the door and you're just there, it could be pretty distracting and annoying to a certain extent. So if you are traveling on a long flight, do yourself a favor and avoid these last few rows of the cabin if you can. And then the second part is to avoid the first few rows. And this might be a bit confusing to some people, like why? Like usually people like to be seated in the first few rows, right? Yes, that is true. But there is also where passengers who are parents traveling with babies or infants are usually seated. The reason why is because the first row is usually where the bassinet points are located. And let's be real, traveling with babies can be tough. Babies themselves, they have their own body clock and it's already tough for them to be in a different environment, in a shared space that they are not familiar familiar with. And as a parent, it's also a lot to be traveling with babies. So if you think that this might pose an issue for you for some reason, I would highly recommend you avoid the first few rows of the cabin as well. In other words, the middle section is actually the best place to be when you're traveling on a long flight, in my personal opinion. And based on my experience operating at least 500 flights a year when I was still flying as a flight attendant. The third tip is to sort out your meal before the flight, sort of. If you have any dietary restrictions, I would encourage you to request for special meals. Even if you don't, you might still want to check what they serve on board, just in case it doesn't really live up to your expectations, or maybe if you consider yourself a picky eater, then you can maybe plan around a little bit. I feel like this is like so important, but people tend to forget. Like when I was flying, I've seen countless occasions where people have dietary restrictions, or they really can't eat whatever that was served on board, and they didn't bring anything to eat, and it ended up affecting their travel experience, because hangriness is never good, and I don't want this to happen to you. So remember to plan your meal beforehand, unless you are a very easy eater and you don't really have any dietary restrictions. Number 4 is to bring your own snacks to, again, save yourself from hangriness. So depending on the departure time of your flight, that would determine the kind of service that's run on board, whether it's a breakfast, brunch, lunch, dinner, supper, or light meal, whatever. That sometimes would also determine when the first meal service would start, and sometimes it really takes a while for the food to come out. So I would suggest bringing your own snacks just to protect yourself and just to help take care of yourself in case you really need to eat something but the food is not ready yet. The service would usually start from either the front of the cabin or the last row of the cabin. So if you're not seated in the middle section, which again, like I said in the beginning, I think is the best place to be, you might find yourself in a bit of a waiting game. Again, I'm speaking from my personal experience flying with a full service career like Singapore Airlines, and also flying as a passenger with other full service airlines. If this is not applicable to you in your itinerary, please feel free to take this with a grain of salt. Number 5 is hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. The airplane cabin is extremely dry. When I talked about my journey with Singapore Airlines in this video, I also talked about how I first got skin rashes when I went for my first ever flight, and that is because the cabin air is extremely dry, and not only that, it's also extremely dirty. But that is a story for another day. So if you are traveling on a long flight, please make sure that you hydrate yourself, drink lots of water. My recommendation is to drink every hour, and I think that would also help you move around a little bit, because you need to go to the washroom and you need to stand up and you need to stretch, which brings me to my last point: stretch. I think stretching is super important, because we're seated in a very small, not very cozy seat for a really long time. So I would recommend stretching, and do it every waking hour if possible. You could do a light stretch just to make sure that your body is not too stiff, because the dry air, the recycled air, and also the fact that the air quality is not great could really make you feel like jaded and tired. So please stretch. So this is also why, again, going back to my first tip, I am a huge advocate for choosing an L-seat, and a God tier L-seat, Phoebe's version if possible. Okay, so keep that in mind. I think that would be really helpful for your next long flight. Okay friends, that is all I have for this video. Let me know in the comment section down below which tip that you find most helpful. If you find this video useful, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye now.